The desert remembers everything. Even when kingdoms vanish into dust, even when names are swallowed by the winds, the desert holds the truth in its silence. And somewhere beneath the drifting dunes of an ancient land, once walked a queen whose story history tried and failed to erase. Her name was Zahara, a name carried only in whispers, a name stripped from scrolls by jealous scribes, a name banned by kings who feared the power of a woman who rose higher than any of them ever could. But the desert never forgot her. Zahara was not born to royalty. She was born to the wandering people of the Red Sands, tribes who moved with the wind, slept under stars bright enough to blind the eyes, and believed that freedom was the only true crown. She grew up listening to campfire tales of warriors, prophets, and distant empires that wanted to swallow their desert whole. As a child, she walked barefoot across burning dunes, unafraid of the scorpions, unafraid of the dark. Her grandmother used to say, "A girl who does not fear the desert will one day command it." No one believed it then, but the desert did. When Zahara was 13, the empire of Arakesh invaded the Red Sands, burning tents, seizing land, and forcing tribes to kneel under a foreign banner. Many surrendered. Many were slaughtered. But Zahara ran. She ran not out of fear, but out of fire. She vowed that the last breath she took would not taste like defeat. For years she lived hidden among ruins and mountains, learning the secret language of the desert. She studied the stars, the winds, and the shifting dunes. She watched caravans move like slow serpents and learned how their routes could be controlled. She learned how sandstorms were birthed and how they could swallow entire armies whole. And she learned that knowledge, not swords, was the true weapon of a ruler. By 20, she was no longer a girl. She was a storm in human form. One night, under a crescent moon sharp as a blade, the remaining tribes gathered in secret. They argued, they doubted, they feared. And then Zahara stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but her eyes carried the fire of every injustice she had ever seen. She said, "You kneel because they taught you kneeling is safe. But kneeling only buries you slower. Rise with me, and the desert will rise with us." The tribes rose, and Zahara became their queen, not by blood, but by destiny. Her rule was unlike any the desert had known. She united tribes who had been enemies for generations. She forged alliances with distant nomads. She created safe routes for caravans crossing the silk roads of the sands. Under her reign, trade flourished, knowledge spread, and the desert, long ignored by empires, became powerful enough to shape the world. But envy attracts war, and envy attracts war. The empire of Arakesh returned, this time with armies far larger than before. They marched with iron shields and burning torches, believing that sand and wind could never crush them twice. But Zahara had learned from the desert itself. She knew its secrets in ways no emperor ever could. She sent scouts to lure the army deep into the dunes, far from water, far from shelter. And then she waited for the storm she knew was coming. A storm she had predicted by the tremble of the ground, the taste of the air, the dance of distant sands. It arrived, in the dead of night, like a roaring beast. Thunder rumbled beneath the earth, the wind howled with the force of a god unleashed. The sky disappeared in a wall of gold and darkness as the greatest sandstorm in 100 years rose like a giant awakening from its sleep. And Zahara rode into it. Her warriors followed, their silhouettes swallowed by swirling dust. They knew that the storm was her ally, They knew that Erakesh would be blind. They knew that the desert was on their side. By dawn, the Empire's soldiers lay buried beneath mountains of sand, their banners torn, their king shattered, and the desert stood still, as if bowing before the queen who had proven herself worthy. Zahara did not celebrate. She simply said, "The desert takes only what disrespects it." Her legend grew. Travelers spoke of a queen who could command storms. Scholars wrote of a ruler who united the desert. But the greatest empires feared her power. Her existence threatened kings who ruled from marble palaces. And so, they struck. Not with swords, but with scribes. They erased her name from scrolls. They removed her reign from royal records. They destroyed tapestries that bore her face. They rewrote history to make it seem as though the desert had never had a queen at all. But the desert refused to forget. And 1,000 years later, when explorers dug beneath the sands, they found something impossible. An unbroken seal carved into stone. It bore the symbol of a crescent moon. Beneath it, in ancient script, 5 words were etched: Zahara, Queen of the Red Sands. The world was stunned. Historians argued, scholars denied. But the desert had finally spoken, and it spoke her name.